are we differentiating ourselves in the marketplace when we're asking similar same questions that every sales professional in our industry is asking? And the reality is we become a me too. And then we dabble a little bit into the goals. What are your goals? Okay, what are you looking to accomplish? That's about 7 to 8% into the future. And then maybe 1 or 2% of the questions that we ask will go into the past. And it's something as basic as, hey, Will, how was your weekend?
Hello, Sales Nation. I'm Will Barron, host of the Salesman Podcast, the world's biggest B2B sales show where we help you not just hit your sales target, but really thrive in sales. And with that, let's meet today's guest.
Good morning. My name is Paul Cherry. I'm president and founder of Performance-Based Results. My key is all about how do we ask the right questions to achieve the right outcomes.
On today's episode with Paul, we're diving into the questions that we need to ask to uncover the real buyer needs. And this is from someone who's perhaps a little bit reluctant as well to deal with us in the first place. And also what questions we can ask to really disrupt a current relationship that one of our competitors may have in an account that we want to take over. So with that said, let's jump right in. We're going to try and cover, if we possibly can, with time constraints, 2 topics today: how to uncover what the buyer really wants, and then how to kind of untrench, perhaps trenched in competitors that we've got in the space. But I want to start with, are there any unusual questions, or any uncommon questions that we should be asking our potential customers to find out what their real buyer needs are?
Great question, Will. And my research in terms of questioning skills, what I've discovered is that about 87% of the questions that salespeople ask, and I'm talking about the seasoned, experienced salespeople in the business-to-business arena, selling complex ideas and solutions, multiple people that we have to engage with. And what I mean is, who are you using now? What do you like? What don't you like? What are you paying? How's our service? What are your needs? And then we dabble a little bit into the goals. What are your goals? Okay, what are you looking to accomplish? That's about 7 to 8% into the future. And then maybe 1 or 2% of the questions that we ask will go into the past. And it's something as basic as, hey, Will, how was your weekend? And it's like, here's where I'm going with that, is that the majority of the questions that we ask, they're important. I don't want to downplay them. There's a purpose in understanding the facts, the needs, the wants, what somebody's paying, the budget, decision-making process and timing to make a decision. That's all important. But are we differentiating ourselves in the marketplace when we're asking similar same questions that every sales professional in our industry is asking? And the reality is we become a me too. And we put our customers to sleep. We annoy them, we interrogate them, or whatever. So what I recommend is to really shift the gears is that spend a little bit more time into the future and into the past, and especially into the past. Why? Because rarely, if ever, salespeople go there. Why? And that's because they think, well, the history is dead. There's no money in the past. Everything that you want to know to sell into the future is where? In the past. And for example, it's just asking some similar questions. Tell me a little bit about your background. Tell me about your experiences in the past. What's worked in the past? What hasn't worked? If there's some things that you would change, what might they be? And then I catapult that into the future. As you look to the future, whether it's tomorrow, next week, or next year, what do you see different on the horizon that you're looking to accomplish? See what I mean? It's nothing complex. But I've done this, training and coaching, with clients, and I see that. I don't care whether you're 1 month in the sales job or 25 years. When I ask people, get in your groups and give me a random sample of your top 10 questions that you ask, boom, it's the same.
It seems like, Paul, these questions are questions that make someone go, huh, and then think about something and then answer after processing. Are there any questions we should be asking that stand out, that do that every single time across the board? Or are there any structures to building up a series of questions that enable us to make someone go, and you scratch their head as they think about the answer?
I love where you're going with that, Will, and thank you. It's what I call the power probing question. So, and salespeople got to be careful because I don't want them to get deep into the mechanics of the question. But if you look at the most common questions that we ask, they begin with the 5 W's: the who's, the what's, the where's, the when's, the why's, and the how's. And I get it. I ask a lot of them myself because they're very casual, they're conversational. And I want people to feel comfortable. But a way to shift that gear just a little bit, and that is to start with a descriptive opener. For example, something as simple as the question, so Will, are you the decision maker? Think about that question. Are you the decision maker? Is that an important question to ask? And the answer is, well, yeah, because we want to know are we talking to the right person? Is there a risk in asking that question? Are you the decision maker? And what do you think it is? Yeah, because it's kind of like I might be belittling you or not making you feel important, or it might prompt you to not be honest with me. How would I salvage that question with a descriptive opener, such as describe for me? Okay. Think about it. Just by are you the decision maker? I would change it to describe for me your decision-making process. See that? The difference from are you closed-ended to automatically it becomes open-ended. Okay. And it gets a little bit more, it invites other questions involved in terms of how the decisions are made, who would be involved, and the timing involved, and the priority. I'm getting it more engaging. That's all. Now, so descriptive openers would be describe, tell me, share with me, walk me through, help me understand, clarify, expand upon. You got a lot of choices there. So I will use them on occasion, especially with somebody who's a little guarded, protective, defensive, or a little standoffish. That can help to pull people into the conversation. Another thing that I use that I recommend that salespeople can use, because I go back to what you and I were asking about, a lot of 87% of the questions are in the present. So you'll hear me use things like time comparisons, because they're very casual and conversational. And it might go something like this, Will. So Will, let's talk about, some of the things that you're looking to accomplish. So tell me about your needs next year. Tell me about some of the things that you're looking to accomplish next year. Feedback, dialogue. How's that compared to this year? See, or how's that compared to last year? You see the reflective? So to answer your question, to get people to kind of think, step back and assess and evaluate big picture. Because too often salespeople get into the weeds. What are you using now? What do you like? What are you paying? If I could show you a way, would you be interested? You see what I mean? 2 products, get 10,000 feet, start there and then dive down. Not start at 500 feet and try to dig yourself out of the mud. It's hard. See what I mean?
Yeah, this makes total sense. I love this. Describe for me. I've jotted this down because I've got a sales call straight after this, Paul, and I'll be using that myself. Should the sales call at first meeting, should it always start with these, you might have a way of describing them other than, because this sounds ridiculous the more and more I say it, but kind of confusing, think questions. Should they always start with that and then perhaps wind up with the specifics and close-ended questions to direct people towards one way or another? Or is there a cadence to asking questions to get the most out of the time we have with someone in a call or on a meeting?
Well, that's I love your question. So there's an icebreaker rapport. So I don't want to hammer somebody with a power probing question on the first call, because it's like, let's build a little rapport and get to know each other. Now that depends. That might be 20 seconds. And there are on occasion where you might spend 10 minutes. So one uses discretion. However, I think that we too often salespeople get bogged down on the rapport stage, meaning they want to create all this likability. I want you to like me. I want you to feel comfortable with me. I want you to ensure that I'm credible, all this stuff. And it's like, okay, you're wasting a lot of time. You want to make a great impression with somebody. Guess what? Ask a great question. You know what I mean? And it might go something like this. And I'll give you an example, because I'm working in the medical industry, and one area that this company, it's a Fortune 500 company, very reputable, but like everyone, they're trying to dig deeper, broader, and higher to get into new relationships. And one of the ways to really stimulate and engage the conversation is, hey, Willem, preparation for my call, I'd like to share with you, what we're seeing in the industry. On the one hand, we're seeing these kind of challenges going on. On the flip side, we're seeing the opposite. We're seeing this. I'm curious, based on your experience and what you're doing, what are you seeing? What are you doing? You see what I mean? So I'll leverage in the rapport stage insight in terms of what's going on with their peers, cohorts in the industry, and I'd like to get your perspective. So what I'm doing is I'm inviting your opinions, your thoughts, your emotions to kind of challenge and engage you. See how I can do it? So we can do a power probing question at the very beginning. So we don't spin wheels and waste a lot of time, because you know what? The risk is if I start hammering you with what I call some basic interrogational, situational, ho-hum questions in the beginning, you can see the eyes glassy in the next 3 to 4 minutes, and all of a sudden you're waiting to ask that power probing question. You lost it because the person's like, you know what? I'm really busy. I don't got a lot of time. Show me what you got. And that's the kiss of sales death when somebody says that.
Yeah,
it's a very polite way of, I'm looking to get rid of you. I'll give you 60 seconds, shoot, bull, and then it's like, okay, let me think it over, chew it over, and you know what? Get back to me in a few months, and we'll think about it.
How strategic here, Paul, do we need to be with these questions? With your example there, of kind of using kind of one end of an industry and the other end of an industry, and then getting someone to position themselves within it. Are we being super strategic about, we know where they are, so we kind of add more pain on one side and reduce the upside of the other to kind of get them to leverage themselves or describe themselves as being in a specific place? Or can we be more flippant about this and it's more the question itself that has the value versus how we kind of pigeonhole them within it, if that makes sense?
Oh, yeah. So on the one hand, you can, if somebody's going to be a fence sitter, they'd have to take a position. The one thing is nice about this is you can be very controversial without putting yourself at risk, because all I'm asking them to do is to take a position, to get their thoughts and perspectives. Because the last thing I want to do is to say, let me tell you about who we are and what we can do and how we can help you, only to find out in my sales pitch 2 minutes later, they say, well, you know, we've already tried that. That doesn't work. See what I mean? So I never want to pigeonhole myself with that, okay? You raised a very important point, though. So I don't, the strategic questions, power probing questions, people ask me, how many do we ask? I don't want to be staying at 10,000 feet, because you brought up a good point, and that is I want to steer, guide, direct, and pull people in. Here's what's going on. There's a study done by Dartnell Research Institute. And this was a study done years ago, and that is the question was asked in all industries, the percentage of time that customers, quote unquote, customers, people we're already doing business with, that are telling you exactly what is on their minds. Do you think that's high or low? And the answer is it's low. The percentage of time they're telling what's on their minds is low. They're only telling you about 20% of the time what's on. And as people, I challenge people, why? Here we have relationships with people. Why aren't they disclosing and sharing their thoughts, their perspectives, challenges, needs, wants, and desires and hopes? And for a host of reasons. There's afraid of confrontation, afraid of hurting your feelings. I like you, maybe a negotiating ploy, or maybe it's a lack of trust, confidence. And so what I'm saying is, if they're not telling you what is on their minds, our job is, and can you imagine if we're dealing with prospects now? Oh, it's even worse. So that's why I'm really big. The art of engagement is that I need to connect. I need to get to the truth. I need to understand what customers value. So I'm really big on questioning skills. I want to know is, do you trust? If you don't trust me, if you don't have confidence in me, I'm not going to sell you. Why? Because you're not even going to listen to me, okay? And that's where Dartnell took it further and said 20% of the time customers are actively listening. And the challenge is salespeople, they hear a glimmer of opportunity, what they think might be a buying signal. What do they do? Because they deal with rejection, negativity all the time. They want to pounce and sell. And I'm all for selling if the customer's listening and open and receptive to change. So to get to your point, we get into this other type of questioning skills, okay, which is tactical. So I move beyond the power probing questions, the descriptive openers and getting into the future and the past, because I want to get into specifically, tell me what is it you're saying? More importantly, tell me what is it you're not saying? And what's the motivation, okay? Because when emotions and logic cross, typically, Will, which one rules? Emotions. Emotions, yeah. So I want to get to the emotions. And that's where I get very tactical, just listening for the clues, okay? What people are telling me. What are they hinting to me, okay? Would you like to know examples? Would that help?
I want to stop here because you just said about 15 things that I want to run through, and I don't want to lose the train of thought here. How do we ask someone, Paul? How do we ask someone what aren't they telling us kind of subtly and succinctly? Because I guess if we've got a good relationship with them, we can just jump straight in with that question and they'll go, oh, yeah, well, now you mention it, I've not said this, this, and this, and this. But with someone new, and perhaps if they're holding a little bit back, What questions can we ask them to uncover some of this extra layer of data that we need to be able to help them?
Here's the litmus test of a good sales call, and that is who did most of the talking. If the salesperson did most of the talking, it was not a good sales call. If the customer did most of the talking, great sales call. Many times we can get into what I call prompters. And Will, it's something as simple as, really? Can you tell me more? Can you expand upon that? Sometimes just being inquisitive or actually being very humble, humility, because too often we want to impress customers with our knowledge, our experience, and that we can be problem solvers, solution providers. The paradigm shift is as we get more experienced, we lose that ability to be inquisitive. So my job is to be inquisitive. And I do it from a questioning standpoint. I do it when somebody is giving me clues. So it could be something like, I'll give you an example. Paul, one of the things, we're looking at some ways to better grow our business. Something as simple as that. We're looking at some ways to better grow our business. Now, the wrong way to handle that, Will, would be for me to jump in and say, so I can help you. Let me tell you what I can do, experience and how we can help you do that. That's just closing the opportunity. Whereas what I mean by that example of being humble and inquisitive is saying, Will, you mentioned you're looking. Tell me more. Tell me about the criteria that's important to you. What have you looked at so far? What have you seen? What's the ideal outcome you're looking for? So it's going to prompt questions. See, from a tactical standpoint, I want to really dive deeper to get to I'm not going to tell you how I can help you until you lay it out what's important to you. Make sense?
That makes total sense.
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. And then, as I said, there's a few things I want to run through here because you've just thrown so much value into this. Next one is, and this there might be a really obvious answer to this, but other than someone, you're in a business meeting with them and they're on the phone and not really paying attention to you, how do we know when someone is actively listening to us? Perhaps even on the phone would be an even better example. How do we know when someone is actively listening to us? And what do we do, perhaps on the phone, when we know that they're not really listening? We can hear tapping in the background and they're on the keyboard doing their emails. Is there any way we can grab their attention? Or is this an excuse just to go, okay, I'll call you back tomorrow, something like that?
Yeah, I mean, if you're hearing yes, and that's right. The customer is typically multitasking there. That's where questioning skills become even more important. So my recommendation is, and it's a give and take. Conversations are give and take. Share an idea or perspective, and it might be 30 seconds to explain, and then to be able to come back and say, well, so Will, tell me a little bit about your perspective, how that might help you. So what I'm trying to do is, because the customer gets back to 20% of the time they're actively listening, I want to engage you to have 100% listening. Customers love to talk. They love to hear their perspectives. They're verbalizing, they're expressing their ideas, opinions, and thoughts. And that's why it's important to get to their emotional layers, needs. All right. The more we start talking, the more we push people away. Salespeople are guilty of this because salespeople too love to hear themselves talk. Let's give our customer the platform. It's important. That's going to be key.
I love this, Paul.
Yes.
I don't want to kind of just gloss over that. You said something that's I've never thought about saying. Perhaps you do it conversationally, but how might that help you if you just explain something and you're doing it from, perhaps, tell me if I'm wrong here, but you're doing it from a position of you're not trying to trip them up. It's not like when you do a presentation or your sales manager's presenting and then you go, what did I just say? It's not a case of that. It's a case of getting them to visualize what you've just dictated to or shared with them, future pace it, and then report back to you on whether this could be helpful or not. I think that's really powerful.
Yes. And it's because if you watch, salespeople have been trained on feature benefit selling. Let me tell you about the feature and how it's going to help you. But they too often, 50% of the time, they go too long-winded. Okay. It's supposed to be 30 seconds, but then it becomes 3 minutes. And then number two, then they don't come back with a question. They kind of shut up and they're like, okay, Will, would you like to ask me another question? And then it also like, now the customer has full control. See? And I think two things. Salesperson has to be in control. However, the customer has to be empowered to be in control. They feel in control when they are expressive and then sharing their ideas, needs, wants, and so forth. So it has to be a win-win.
Perfect.
Right?
And
especially at the phone.
Definitely. And a final thing that on your rapid pace example before, Paul, that came to mind was You kind of half describe someone who's perhaps, I think you used the word reluctant, or they're sat back in their seat and perhaps they're listening, but they're not opening up to you. Are there any examples of questions or a kind of a series of questions or a structure to a conversation that we can have with an individual who is perhaps reluctant, perhaps that we haven't built that trust, we haven't built that rapport with them yet? Is there any way we can open them up by giving them value, leading questions?
Yeah, so I'm always, and I'll say this really succinctly. As I engage somebody, I look for 3 levels of interest. It's called the should stage, want to stage, have to stage. Should stage means you engage somebody. You're asking, hey, I'm asking all these great questions, but you're not opening up. It means that there's no desire, motivation, or interest. They are fully in a complacent mode. The reality is move on, okay? Or find somebody who's more interested. You're just, at that moment, it's not a good opportunity. Invest your time better wisely with somebody else. Want to stage is there's receptivity, there's openness, there's a need. So what happens is salespeople, when they find somebody in a want to stage, remember I said about pouncing, selling, trying to close? The problem with the want to stage is, oh, I really like this, Will. This is great. This is exactly what we need. Oh my goodness, I can imagine. And then they inflect the word but or however, right? Which means not right now, no money in the budget, maybe next year, or when the timing right, we're going to give you a call. What I want to do is take people to the have to stage, where the recognition for change, embracing change, outweighs that desire for complacency. So I need to understand that pain or problem, okay? So what I try to do is I'm looking for, without being manipulative here though, okay? Again, being inquisitive. When somebody starts to express that there's a problem or concern or issue, is that, tell me more about that problem. How long has this been going on? What do you think's been causing this problem? Tell me, Will, what is it? And then I want to know about cost. What's it costing you in terms of time, people, resources, opportunity? And then my last question is implication question. It was, well, Will, what if you don't address this issue? I'm curious. What if you don't address this issue? What might be the impact on you and your business? So that question, impact, implication, if you do nothing, if you don't address the issue, how might this affect you and your business? Their answer will tell you or me whether in the should, want to, or have to stage. When they are in the have to stage, oh, are you kidding me? If we don't address this issue, it's going to cost us this, people, resources, opportunity. The competition is going to eat us alive. It could put us out of business. Boom, you've gotten the green light to do what? Sell. So that's what I look for, okay? I'm always looking at when the customer is in that have to stage. Let's get real. Is everybody in that? No, very few. But I'm looking for people in the want to stage, take them to the have to stage. Does that make sense?
That makes total sense. This is brilliant. And before we move on to perhaps, I feel like I should be whispering this, disrupting our competitors' business relationships. Before we move on to that, a question that came to mind here are there any ways, and perhaps a personal example would be fantastic to demonstrate this, but are there any ways we can use questions to dig ourselves out of a situation? Because I'm sure I'm not the only salesperson who's listening to this right now, or part of this conversation, that has been on a phone call, been in a meeting, shit's hit the fan, we said the wrong thing, we've inadvertently got someone's backs up. Again, a personal example would be amazing if you've got one, but is there any way that we can use questions to dig ourselves out of a hole?
And you mean like a customer service problem that happened, or we made a fool of ourselves?
I mean, me working in medical device sales, I've looked like a dickhead in front of many surgeons by saying the wrong thing, promising something by mistake, not doing it, trying to manipulate anyone or trying to harm anyone or harm a relationship. But I've screwed up loads of times. It seems like with what we've been through so far, there must be a way of asking questions to turn this on its head.
Yeah, and we've all heard the expression, and I talk about Columbo, remember the famous TV personality back in the 70s, the show The Detective, and how Lieutenant Columbo would bumble through the questions. And I think that there's, believe it or not, I'm not all about asking sophisticated, thought-provoking questions, but I think that again, humility, and when you mentioned about surgeons, when you mentioned about people with egos who take great pride in their experience, their knowledge, their intelligence, and who they are. I think by showing respect and that we do value the opinions of others. Yet, at the same time, on the other perspective is being an equal to them. So to dig ourselves out of the hole, it really is the perspective is that is, here's an example. I'll give you one because the salesperson just asked me this yesterday, and it was, the customer said, hey, we looked at everything, and in fairness, we looked at the pricing of your competitor versus yours. We just really don't see any value. And he's frustrated, the salesperson. He goes, because we can respond that very same day, yet the competitor they want to consider is a 3-day response. And he's like, what do I do? They're commoditizing us, even they don't seem to understand the value. How do you dig yourself out of the hole? And I said, here's what you need to ask this question. And it goes something like this. Will, so tell me, what is it that I'm failing to understand to address what's most important to you and your organization? See, or what's important to you and your people, okay, or you and your customers. So what's embedded in there is that I'm taking it upon myself. Help me out here. What is it I'm failing to understand? Right? Educate me. Because again, I'm trying to get to, you're holding back something you're not telling me. Let's get to the truth. See, so that's a way of digging out of the hole. Because if we can get to the truth, that's half the battle to making the sale.
For sure. It definitely is. That is a perfect question that perhaps is one to scribble down, Sales Nation, because that would have got me out of some holes, I'm sure. But yeah, moving on to kind of where we want to wrap up the show here, Paul, and disrupting competitive relationships. And I don't mean this from a malicious standpoint. I mean, you tell me if I'm wrong. Maybe we should be aggressive about it. But when I say that, I feel we're looking for, if the competitor relationship is a chair, we're looking for that wobbly leg that perhaps we can leverage or kind of bring up and discuss and kind of just rock that relationship a little bit. And I guess this comes up in conversations where we ring up, we go into the meeting, there's something there because they've had a meeting with us. They've accepted kind of us going on their diary. So there's something there to go at. But we ring up, we go into the meeting and they say, hey, it sounds fantastic, but our competitor is doing great for us right now. How do we get around that? And how do we kind of uncover any holes in the relationship that our competitors currently have with our potential customers?
Yes. No, it's a great one. And here's a classic example of what goes on. Just like you said, salesperson calls up, engages, or face-to-face, and the questions come up. So who are you using now? What do you like about them? What don't you like? If there's one thing you change, what might it be? And what happens is these kind of questions will typically force that customer or prospect, that is, to say, well, we're really happy, we're really content right now. Leave me your product literature or whatever, or stay in touch and maybe next year we might consider you. And the reality is probably nothing's going to happen. And you're right. I want to create a crevice, okay, a wedge. So rather than getting it, and these are getting back to these questions that kind of just push people away versus pulling people in. What I want to know is, my recommendation is, don't get into the competitor, okay, likes and dislikes. What I want you to focus in on questions like this is, tell me a little about some of the changes that you're experiencing in your industry. Tell me about some of the changes you're experiencing in your company. Tell me some of the change you're experiencing on the job. Here's the what I call the catalyst, the question on change. Because the reality is, when you ask people, changes for you, changes for me, changes for everyone, when we ask, are you experiencing any change? Automatically, what do people say? Yes, a lot of change. And what I'm doing is I'm trying to trigger something, emotions. So I want them thinking about changes and how they're dealing with change. What are some of the changes going on? And what happens is I want to stretch a person's mindset, start to be thinking about changes. And one of the changes is, let's go back. When you originally, went with this supplier, and it might be one, those, we've been using this supplier for the last 20 years. You know what I mean? I'm like,
yeah.
Oh, please, gag. And I go, one of the questions you'll hear me ask is, well, let's go back to, when you originally went with this supplier. Help me understand the criteria that was important to you, your needs back then. And then the follow-up question is, dialogue, feedback. What's changed since then? See what I mean? And they get them talking more. And then as you look to the future, what changes do you see going on the horizon? So it's not about the supplier, it's all about the bigger changes. And what I'm trying to do is disrupting, get them to think about is, there are obviously some things that are going to surface where the current supplier's not meeting those needs. And I need to find that opportunity where it's not being met so that I can sell to that particular need. That's all. And exploit it. Right? Does that make sense?
That makes total sense. What are a few example questions that we can ask? Because I know damn well there's going to be people scribbling down every other thing that we mention in this episode, Paul. So to wrap up things here, what are questions that we should overtly ask, if there's a structure to them, to once we get past this, well, perhaps our current supplier is, they're not perfect, they're falling on this, they're not delivering as promptly, the price has gone up over time. What are a few questions that we could ask to uncover some of these discrepancies from what they originally promised to the change to where they are now?
And so I had a client who was talking about engaging about, it turned out the people process. So it was a manufacturing, and what it was uncovered is with the current supplier was not able to meet, turnaround time, and there was quality issues what surfaced. And so what they were able to explore is asking the questions, tell me a little bit about, where this is impacting you and your business when you're not having this, this service provided within a 24-hour window. And then the questions was asking, what is costing you in terms of resources, opportunity? What happened was they weren't able to meet customer expectations. And then it turned out there was a threat of a customer pulling the plug. And the question came up as, how much is this customer worth to your business? And it turned out this was a $150,000 customer. And so they found out that there were 3 other customers are affected. Problem was now there's all of a $400,000 opportunity. And that question was, so help me understand if the concerns are, if the things continue this way, how might the consequences or risks on your business moving forward? And that's where it created that discomfort to say, you know what? I got my boss breathing down my back, questioning, why are we doing this? So what we found out was, just not the vendor not meeting expectations, but now the people decision-making process. There was other people internally, the internal customer, that was not satisfied, putting pressure on this person, this contact, that they had to create change, drive change. So where I'm going at is I want to be able to find out what changes are going on. I want to understand the people that are involved with it. Number 3 is I want to know the buying criteria. What is it they value? See? So a lot of times when people talk about, we're happy, we're content, the price is good. But I really want to know is, putting price aside, is let's talk about what value means to you. And I find that such a powerful question because people will talk about things such as service, quality, durability, outcome, performance, results, and they give me the criteria, and that allows me to say as well, let's talk about those areas. And I get tactical. Quality. When, since you mentioned the word quality, let's talk about where quality hasn't been meeting your expectations recently. Because when they give you a word, usually there's history behind that, why that's not being met. See the tactics behind that? That's very powerful to help people kind of like listen for the clues, what people are telling you, and then expand upon that to take that further.
I've got 2 things I want to wrap up show with. The first one, when you are having this conversation, when you're having this sales conversation, I assume you're jotting things down as you go through it. Paul, what does your notepad look like? Are you listening out for those keywords, scribbling the word down, and then reminding yourself to follow up, and then kind of going with the pain points alongside it? What does the page look like when you're going through a discovery call like this?
That's right. So I just write down, I write because I can remember when I'm writing, and people will, what happens is customers are like a dog on a bone. They're going to chew on something, an issue. So they're going to keep hinting at an issue because they're going to go around in circles. So yeah, we've had some concerns we've been struggling with. It's been a real frustration. One of the pain points we've had. See what I mean? They keep feeding you with a key word. And so that's right. To have control of the conversation is I need to manage that conversation, knowing that I may not pounce on that word immediately. Hey, you mentioned the word struggling. Can you tell me more? But I'm going to come back to that 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes later. So I'll write down that word and then go back to that because I want to go to that emotional driver. What's underneath that word that's creating those issues? See, there's a lot of hidden meaning behind that. And that's Paul, what my notepad would look like.
Do you purposefully leave it a few minutes and then come back to it? Or do you kind of dive straight in? Is there a reason why you'd kind of leave it a little bit? I guess you could raise the tension or difficult questions, easy questions, difficult questions. Is there a strategy for kind of when you would come back to that important point?
And it depends on the customer. Some customers are a little cautious, close-minded, reserved, or patient, or methodical. So, and like peeling the onion, I got to go slow. Other customers where it's like, here's my pain. Let me tell you all. And then it's like I get the knife out and I open it up and need to look inside.
Yeah.
So it really does depend. But there is what happens is, because I'm a real big believer in getting customers to open up, the psychology of the sales process. It's a therapy process, really it is. I mean, to really understand. So I got to bring those pain points to the surface and diagnose it. Ideally, I want to get to the issues immediately if I can. Absolutely. Because, but sometimes you have somebody really talking 3 minutes straight, and all of a sudden they're pummeling me with all these emotional words, and it becomes a smorgasbord. Okay, which one do I choose first? You see what I mean? It depends.
Perfect. It depends is the answer to a lot of my questions, which I don't know whether they're good questions or they're totally unsuccinct. And so it comes back to that. I guess maybe that's just the nature of sales. With that, Paul, I've got one final question for you, mate. I've not asked this in a while. So regular listeners all know that I've not asked this in about 6 months' time, but I'm bringing this question back. So your answer can't be anything to do with questions or question-based selling or anything like that. If you could go back in time and speak to your younger self, what would be the one piece of advice you'd give him to help him become better at selling?
It is just be a sponge for learning. That is going to be key. And that is because of the access of information that is available today, whether it's books, the internet, peers, cohorts. Put our ego aside, listen and learn. That's going to be key, the driver point. So that would be my message. The one thing that I would change, devour more, okay, and to accelerate our career process, our success.
Perfect. Well, with that, Paul, tell us where we can find your current book, which is coming in second edition, and your brand new book, which won't be out for a few weeks after this episode airs, but I want to plug that up for you as well. And then where we can find out more about you, sir.
Okay. Go to pbresults.com or Paul Cherry, one word, Paul Cherry like the fruit.com. And I suggest you access my free resources, specifically the 75 best questions to close more business. That's our research of going out on more than 1,000 sales calls, and also a compilation from my book, Questions That Sell, the best of the best questions to ask. It's a great coaching tool, research tool, resource tool that you can use in the field when you're engaging customers. Okay?
And plug your new book that's coming out as well.
Yes, The Ultimate Sales Pro. That's going to be coming out August, that next month. And I'm excited. It's about the 25 most innovative, thought-provoking ideas for salespeople that are really good at what they're doing, but want to be at the top of their game. So what are the things that you need to do? It's to challenge your mindset, our paradigms, step outside of our comfort zone. Why? So we can achieve the success that we truly deserve. So I'm excited about that.
Yeah, I'm excited as well. And we'll link to all that, the new book, the old book, everything else in the show notes to this episode over at salesman.org. And with that, Paul, I want to thank you for your time, mate. I really enjoyed this episode. Really enjoyed recording with you. And I appreciate your time, mate. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you, Will. Okay, my pleasure.